Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Mel, and if you're not new and you're returning, I want to apologize. I have been gone for about 2 months, so forgive me please. But with that being said, I do have a little announcement, or for me a big announcement, depending on how you want to look at it. I am expecting a new little one. I have one child. If you missed my video where we were discussing, what I was discussing was a little bit more personal. I was talking about how, stocks saved my life, and I mentioned my daughter. I do have a child, but I'm expecting a new one. So I've been out. Your girl has been down. First trimester did me in, but I'm back. I'm energized. I'm ready to talk about money again. So here we are. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. I felt this video, I wanted to go into it talking about investing, just like the basic foundation for investing, just because most people, the average person, they don't really know much about stocks. And like I always mentioned in my previous videos, if you don't know much about stocks, or if you don't know anything about stocks, I always say to start out with index funds, okay? And so we'll get into why I like index funds in this video, some of the benefits that it may have over other saving avenues that you may do, like a savings account or high yield or whatever it may be that you use to save your money. Index funds for me is the OG. It is the go-to. It is what I always tell people to look into when you don't know anything about the stock market, okay? So with all that being said, let's get into the video. Okay, so the what and why. I'm gonna be quick. So the what an index fund is, I always say think about it like a basket of stocks. It's a variety of different stocks, okay? So let's just say you wanted to own Apple, Amazon, Nvidia, maybe, I don't know, DR Horton. You want to own a whole bunch of different stocks, but you don't have the money to buy each one of them individually. You could get major diversification by buying an index fund. So an index fund, think about it like it tracks a index. Typically it tracks an index or indexes. It could track more than one in the same fund. So your three major indexes, you have the Dow, you have the S&P 500, the NASDAQ, and then I always like to bring up the Russell 2000, and I will explain to why I like the Russell 2000 later in this video. But that is the what an index fund is. The why. Why do I like index funds? Okay, I really like index funds for one main reason. Like I mentioned earlier, diversification. So if you own, just say, one individual stock for the entire year, and some news came out about that stock, I don't know, some type of fraud going on, anything could happen. If you put all of your eggs into one basket, you could potentially lose a whole lot of money, versus if you diversify by buying an index fund, you wouldn't lose as much because you have so many stocks into one basket. So maybe, yes, some news came out about the individual stock that you wanted to buy, but if that individual stock is inside of an index, maybe it went down, but the rest of the stocks maybe went up. So your risk is kind of balanced somewhat. You may not lose much of anything because of the risk is offset by all the other stocks. So that's why I like index funds. So let's get into my top 3 index funds for 2025. Okay, so stock number 1, or index / ETF number 1, is VOO. And I couldn't go and start this video without mentioning VOO first, because it's super popular for one. A lot of you probably already even heard of VOO, but what VOO is, it is Vanguard's ETF that tracks the S&P 500. So if you would have put money into an index or ETF that tracked the S&P 500 last year, 2024, and held for the entire year, you would be at about 25% of your money, right? So that's great. Without saying anything else, that alone is so great. And I will say now, those returns aren't typical. Like, you're not going to get that every single year, but 2024 was a really good year for the stock market. The expense ratio of VOO is low as well. So by this, I mean, how much will it cost you to own these shares or to buy these shares? So the expense ratio of VOO is currently at 0.03%. So this basically means for every $1,000 of VOO that you own, you only pay about 30 cents to own these shares, which is excellent. excellent. It's phenomenal. Okay. The type of stocks that's inside of this, because it's the S&P 500, you know, your major, what's weighted the most is going to be most of your Mag 7 stocks. So your Mag 7 is like your mega cap companies. So Meta, Apple, Amazon, Nvidia, Google, I believe. So these are like your top stocks in this ETF. And another reason why I like VOO is because of the rate of return over the course of 3, 5, and 10 years. So for every stock that I mentioned, I'm going to give you the rate of return for each. So the 3-year rate of return of VOO is 9%. The 5-year rate of return is about 14%. And the 10-year rate of return is about 13%. And the last thing that I want to mention about VOO is it does pay a quarterly dividend. So a dividend is almost like, here's a thank you for owning shares of us or the index or ETF. So they pay a quarterly dividend. So every 3 months, depending on however many shares you own. So for each share, you get $1.73, right? And I know you're probably thinking, $1.73. But the more you start to add in your portfolio, these will start to add up. They will compound on each other and you just make more and more money. So VOO is stock number 1. All right, so stock number 2 is FSKAX. FSKAX is Fidelity's total market index fund. So it tracks the total stock market for the most part. It's about 3,800 stocks into this one index fund. It moves very similar to index fund or ETF that would track the S&P 500. As a matter of fact, this was my very first stock index fund that I bought when I started investing. And I had one from Fidelity that tracked the S&P 500. And then I also had this one, the FSKAX. What I noticed was they moved very similar to each other. So when I would check my returns, you know, for the day, I would notice that it was very similar. So I just narrowed it down to one, and I chose FSKAX because I felt I was more diversified. So I love it. The expense ratio is extremely low. It's about 0.015%, which is great. As I mentioned in VOO, that one was 0.03. This is 0.015. So super expense ratio is just chef's kiss. Love it. Absolutely love it. The returns on this is great as well. So you have your 3-year return of about 8%, your 5-year return is 14%, and then your 10-year return is about 12%. And once again, this particular index fund tracks your major indexes pretty much across the board. So your Dow, your S&P, your NASDAQ, everything is inside of this, weighted differently, but it is super, super diversified. So if you're looking for one that is like diversification out of this world, I absolutely love FSKAX and I 100% recommend it. All right, so we've made it to the end, and the last stock that I do want to mention is IWM. So with IWM, it is a ETF that tracks the Russell 2000. So that's why I mentioned the Russell 2000 at the beginning of this video. So it will make a little bit more sense when I mention this. So the Russell 2000 is the index that tracks the small cap performance. So your small cap stocks are your smaller businesses. In comparison to the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, IWM, or the Russell 2000, the performance on it wasn't as good. So last year, as I mentioned, the S&P 500 was about, rate of return was about 24% or 25%. The NASDAQ was about 31%, but IWM, I keep saying IWM, but the Russell 2000 was only about 16%. So even though last year the rate of return was lower in comparison to some of the other indices, I feel that there may be some room to grow, especially with, you know, the new administration coming in. Trump has a America First initiative, and with interest rates possibly or going down, they have already cut, they're probably going to cut more later on in the year. This sets up small businesses. This is where small businesses are able to borrow easily, so they may be able to grow their businesses more, which in return for you could be something good if you own on IWM. So once again, IWM is the index that tracks the Russell 2000, which is your small cap stocks. Your expense ratio is about 0.19. And then if you're looking at the 3, the 5, and the 10-year rate of return, so again, the rate of return isn't going to be as much as it was for the S&P or the NASDAQ, but the 3-year is about 5%, the 5-year is 10%, and then your 10-year is about 9%. But once again, like I said, with this new administration coming in, and then with them, the Federal Reserve continuing to by cutting interest rates, I think that smaller cap companies may potentially benefit from it. So I have, once again, the VOO is my top one. My number one stock that I'm looking into, FSKAX, which is Fidelity's Total Market Index Fund. And then last, I have IWM, which is the ETF. It's not an index fund, it's an ETF, but it tracks the index, the Russell 2000. Those are my top 3 stocks to watch for me this year, for the year 2025. So I thank you guys once again for coming to yet another video. I missed you guys. Thanks for those who have come back to watch me again. I pray I've provided some value for you, and for all the new people, please go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, comment, share, help me grow my channel, and I will see you in the next video.